I'm Tom Martin. I'm the CEO and founder of LawDroid, and the video you're about to watch first aired live at the 3rd annual LawDroid AI Conference. One thing I would ask of you is if you could please keep in touch. You can do that by subscribing to LawDroid Manifesto. It's our Substack where we can keep you up to date about the latest developments in law and technology. So please enjoy the video. If you have any feedback, please let us know in the comments below. Enjoy! I'm really thankful to be joined by Dr. Megan Ma, Damien Riehl, and Joanne Sprague, and we'll get started. Hey, everybody.
Hi.
I'm really excited for our discussion today because for the audience, the State of AI panel, what my intention is with it is to really share where things are at right now. Here, we have some of the leading minds of how AI is playing out in the law. And so if each of you can just introduce yourself, and then we'll get into it. But let's start with you, Megan.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me here. I'm the executive director of a research lab at the law school, the Legal Innovation Through Frontier Technology Lab. By law school, I mean Stanford Law School. It's quite a mouthful, so just call us the LIFT Lab.
And you, Joanne?
Great. Thanks, Tom, for having us all. Hi, all. My name is Joanne Sprague. I lead the Everlaw for Good program at Everlaw. Everlaw is a cloud-native e-discovery software platform. We've been around for about 15 years, and we're one of the leading e-discovery tools in the space. And since 2017, we've had our social impact program called Everlaw for Good, which provides free and discounted access to nonprofit organizations, pro bono practices, educators, and investigative journalists. So a lot of my knowledge in this space is around access to justice and how tech interplays with that, but excited to chat about sort of the broader state of AI.
Great. Damien?
Damien Riehl. I'm a solutions champion at Clio, which is a made-up title for a made-up job, where I'm a builder who then talks about the stuff that we build after a career working for top secret Reuters, then with Fastcase, which turned into VLEX, which turned into Clio. I essentially get to be able to work with some of the smartest people in the world on a billion document data set of cases, statutes, regulations, motions, briefs, pleadings, where we extract everything that matters and run large language models across them.
That's awesome. And as Satish let slip earlier, you're also a singer and a multi-talented performer. So let's talk about where things are at. Like we heard a lot from Nikki. Basically, if we start with the topic of AI's trajectory, like the difference between the hype and reality, because there certainly has been a lot of hype, but as we've seen through the charts that were just shared with us, there's a lot of reality. And although it might be harsh, we are trying to give the audience the perspective of our experience from like seeing this day in, day out. So if we were to strip away the hype, what has AI actually delivered, in the legal industry over the past, let's say, year? And where has it clearly fallen short? Because it's not perfect, but at the same time, there's a lot of value in what it can deliver. And is it, solely like the efficiency plays that Nikki mentioned, or is it really crossed over into qualitative differences? And how about you, Megan? What do you think?
I think it's a great question. For me, the biggest impact that it has on the legal industry so far is that it's starting to kind of move attorneys. I think it's a cultural shift that's happening. And that to me is the biggest leap. For a long time, I think attorneys were viewed as kind of they were not touched by technology at all. And I think for the first time, that's very real, that something, at least even if it's incremental change, is happening internal to law firms. We're seeing, really high actually retention rates with a lot of these different technologies. People are at least experimenting for the first time. And so I think that to me is very real and definitely not the hype side. Probably what's still missing in my mind is figuring out exactly the right combination of the human machine collaboration. I think we're still viewing a lot of the technology as single directed efforts. It's sort of hyper user driven, but a lot of what we're seeing at the state of play in terms of tools like Claude Code or other computer use agents is that it's much more a collaborator, it's much more a colleague, a teammate, and that kind of mindset. And I think we're just slowly transitioning into that space.
How about you, Damien? Like, I'm also thinking like from a technical standpoint, what are these things that able to do.
I think that Hemingway said that bankruptcy happens slowly and then quickly. I think we're seeing that with technology and with both with legal practice as well. With legal practice for the client side, the corporate legal side, and then also the law firm side. Where on the client side, I'm just seeing people embracing technology to be able to say, "Hey, we've been upset with rising prices of our law firms year over year for decades, and my chief financial officer has been breathing down my neck to reduce cost." And now all of a sudden we have this amazing technology to be able to do that. And so I talked to a Fortune 20 company who said that we have built already 55 different workflows to be able to reduce external spend. That's 55 that they've built. They're currently building another 56 more, and then they're going to be building another 53 or so by the end of Q2. So by the end of Q2, they will have already built about 160 different workflows. That is what they used to spend on law firms that they're bringing in-house. And what this legal ops person said is that the CEO has told everybody going down that the business people will self-serve. Do not talk to a in-house counsel unless absolutely necessary. Use the bots to be able to answer the questions. If necessary, talk to an in-house counsel. But almost under no circumstances do we farm that work externally. So I think that this is something that should really open up eyes because this person I talked to is not broadcasting that to the world. And the law firms that they're working with don't know why the phone is not ringing as much anymore. It's just not ringing. And so I think that people that Megan and I were just talking in the green room, talking about how this is something that law firms are always in a race to be second. They want to be fast followers, and so I think that those people that are fast followers are just not going to know why the phone stopped ringing. So think the winners on the law firm side are going to be people like legal quants that are now doing amazing things by vibe coding and a bunch of other lawyers. I think we now realize that the winners in this game is going to be subject matter experts, people that have stuff in their brains that says this is the way that I do my work every day. And I think that we're seeing the slowly, but then quickly. I think the quickly is here where subject matter experts are winning the day.
Yeah, it also brings to mind Zach Shapiro and the Cloud Native law firm, and basically his thesis that, we download our expertise and judgment to skills and externalize it, and that's how we can make best use of it. How about you, Joanne? Like the hype versus reality, what have you seen it actually, it being AI actually impact?
Yeah, so my frame of reference for most of this stuff is e-discovery, right? Which is probably one of the most relevant use cases for AI because, I don't think there are a whole lot of lawyers who wake up, jump out of bed every morning excited to do doc review. So very ripe for disruption. We're finding that there are some legal workflows that are rapidly just going away entirely or changing fundamentally, right? So an example I'll give you is not to hawk our product, but we just came out with this tool in January called Deep Dive, which the shorthand for it is it's sort of like a chat GPT for your document corpus. It only goes within the four walls of your document corpus, which you obviously couldn't upload to a consumer grade or even an enterprise version of a big LLM tool. And so now we're finding that, instead of document review, like the typical document review process of, staffing up a review team and dividing your corpus into assignments and constructing these complex Boolean searches and, doing linear doc by doc review to come up with your smoking gun or bubble up your insights, you're getting those right away, right? So like the whole workflow is just ask the questions you want to know, find your smoking gun right away. So senior litigators, partners, et cetera, can do that. And then the follow-on work becomes verifying the citations, building your case strategy, et cetera, right? And so that sort of e-discovery workflow is just very rapidly turning into something we haven't ever seen before. The other thing that I think is really exciting is how, so I work in the world of large, complex, document heavy cases, and we're seeing more and more that small legal aid teams are able to take those on in a way that they previously couldn't. So we actually, we know this because our Everlaw for Good program has seen about 75% year over year growth the past 2 years running. Now, I'm sure not all of that is from AI, but we also did a survey of legal aid professionals last year, and we found that they're adopting AI at 2 times the rate of the broader legal profession. And that was validated by LSC and the California State Bar. Have done similar surveys, found similar results. And so, some of that growth must be coming from AI adoption and more efficiency and the ability to just take on these larger, more complex cases that they never have been able to do before. What's falling short, I would echo Megan on some of the the culture change pieces. On one hand, it's really, things are really moving. On the other hand, AI cannot solve for the like very human challenge of organizational change management, right? So we're seeing a lot of individual people who are real champions, who are really excited about this stuff. And then we're seeing others who, try it once and like they don't get a great output. I think I heard Damien speak on a podcast recently where he was like, yeah, people say this sucks, but they're using the free version of ChatGPT, right? Like, of course, it's gonna suck. And so, like, figuring that out and getting people past some of the fear barriers, and some of that's going to be coming from the quality of the technology improving because it does suck still in some areas, right? It's not a panacea of perfection and a replacement for human legal work in all areas.
For sure. And there is that jagged frontier that Professor Ethan Mollick talks about. And there's some things it's good at, some things not so great, but it seems to be improving very quickly. The next one, I want to focus more specifically on AI agents because there's been a lot of talk about it. There's different definitions about it. I don't want to get into that part of it right now, but I do want to look at it practically. So, like, if you have any examples that you can think of where AI agents are already uh, outperforming traditional legal workflows, and where are they breaking down? So to give people an idea of like how agents are actually used as opposed to the theory and the talk about it. And if you think that there's any, failure modes that are specific to AI agents, let's start with you, Damien.
I think, and I want to piggyback on what Joanne said. She said, that in a lot of ways, AI still sucks. There's a jagged edge there, and it still sucks. I think we have to define what it is, because the it, of course, is different from ChatGPT free version versus a made for legal tool that a lot of us are building on here, right? So the it is not the same. That is not a monolith, but there's a spectrum of it. And so I would say that it sucks. It has to be defined as what is it. And I would say that if you think about agentic, what is agentic is another definition. We as lawyers love definitions, don't we? And so I think that our what is agentic, and really it's a tool to just get things done. A16Z, Andreessen Horowitz, an analyst said a really good definition of agents is stringing together tasks dynamically. I really like that definition because that really is what human agents do. We call human agents employees, right? They string together tasks dynamically. It's also what a thermostat does, to be able to say, let's string together this task to be able to say, what is the temperature? And then I affect my world. So a thermostat is an agent. TurboTax is an agent. And then we have large language model agents today. So there's a whole spectrum of what it is to be able to do agentic things. And when you think about as agentic workflows go, we, at Vincent for now 3 years have done a task where you do a legal research project process. And if you do a research question, it'll find a case. And then what the agent will do is actually will look through every single case that case cites and see, well, maybe those cases are relevant. And then we'll go to all the cases that cite that case and say, are those relevant? You can imagine somebody programming a bot to be able to do that, right? So the fact that we did it symbolically, that is to do it deterministically versus just programmatic, like probabilistically through a large language model, it's no less agentic on the symbolic side than it is on the probabilistic side. In the end, it's getting the work done. And so I would say that, as we do more agentic things, we have to think more broadly as to how much work can an agent do. And let's do a thought experiment where what if you have an associate bot that goes through all of the documents, all of the emails, all of the client documents and says, oh, this looks like a trade secret issue. This looks like a breach of contract issue. And oh, I heard them say Texas and I heard them say California. And then they say, okay, what are the causes of action for trade secret in Texas and trade secret in California? And this requires 3 elements on this side, but 4 elements on this side. Then take all of the facts and then be able to say, fill in those buckets and put them in each bucket. And then the bot realizes, oh, you're missing element 3. So then ask the client, hey, can you fill in bucket 3 with new facts? And then throw that from the associate agent up to the partner agent, who will then criticize the associate agent. And then go back and forth until you have diminishing returns. Then throw that to the opposing counsel agent, who then throws rocks at it and says, no, I'm going to win for these reasons, which then bolsters the associate agent's work. And then throw it up to a judge agent, who will then say, oh, I rule for this side for these issues, but that side for that issue, which will then further strengthen the associate's work. And then and only then does it go to a human. So that is what agentic work really, people are doing this today, what I just described. And I think people just haven't realized that as bots like OpenClaw are able to do this kind of back and forth and up and down, um, how much of our work is going to be left for us to do? And I would say the humanity. So anyway, so this is a wild world that I'd be interested in hearing Megan's and Joanne's thoughts on.
Well, for example, like Kevin Keller's doing some amazing work with reasoning systems and them doing that kind of Socratic dialogue and all that. Um, Megan, I mean, you're at the cutting edge of this at Stanford with everything that you're doing. How have you seen AI agents actually outperforming the traditional method?
So, what's been really fascinating is that we ran a pilot study, I think about a year, actually, even 2 years ago in 2024. And we were just looking at basically the state of the art models at the time. So, this was like GPT 4.0. So, now that if I talk about it, it sounds like ancient times, but because GPT 4.0 was the first sort of emergence of O1. And we compared it sort of human against these off the shelf models and like the legal AI tools at the time. And in this small pilot, what we noticed was that the machines were already outperforming the human associates that were doing those exact same workflows. And part of the study sort of covered different ground. We not only looked into not discrete legal tasks, but actually a full end-to-end workflow. And at every juncture, we actually saw these models like the off-the-shelf models and legal AI kind of neck and neck in terms of how well that they were performing. Meanwhile, the humans were sort of consistently viewed as the least preferred based on these senior partners that actually blind review all three of these. And so we're talking about like this in 2024, and then we came out with this paper, which was incredibly, I think, controversial at the time. But what's also kind of fascinating is that last year, or actually not too long earlier, at the end of last year, I'd say, there was a paper that came out between Carnegie Mellon and Stanford, and it was called AI Agents for Work or something like that. And essentially, it was showcasing that we didn't really have very good benchmarks for everything but software engineering or computer science and mathematics. And so, what we're seeing with computer use agents like Claude Code or Codex or whatever, they're all kind of really, really remarkable tools to the point that they're expert level agents and they can kind of program far better than kind of this universe. But what's kind of like fascinating here is it showcased that 92% of work was elsewhere, meaning that because there were not benchmarks in things like administrative tasks or like other areas that we're seeing much more commonly, in our workforce, AI agents didn't seem to be performing very well. So we're going back to sort of Joanne's point of the jagged frontier. And so from what we've started to see is that's because our mindset was still very much in the monolithic models. They're going to get better and better, and then it's sort of a battleground of which one is going to be the best performing. And then we started thinking about, it's kind of like people where actually maybe there's a division of labor that GPT is going to be better at certain tasks and Claude's going to be better at other tasks. But what Damien's sort of pointing out with these various agents interacting with one another in a Socratic way, we're starting to see more and more research actually of how do you actually use orchestrator agents to be able to figure out this managerial role of division of labor. And that's what I think is the most fascinating is people are starting to move out of this mindset that there is going to be a winner take all in the frontier models or in these labs, but that internally, a lot of organizations have decided actually, I think maybe GPT is going to be better at this or Claude is going to be better at this. Now we actually are just going to be training these lightweight models that act as just good managers. And humans are sort of the layer on top where we are verifying that these orchestrator agents are indeed doing a good job in terms of resource management. We started building these tools that actually simulate team configurations. So one of the big things that we're noticed within law firms is senior partners, for example, always prefer, for example, the associates that they work with the most. But maybe there are sort of hidden talents with other associates, and then some of them are under resourced. And so, what agents can do is you can sort of create them as digital twins and then create sort of these configurations and play out different teams. And so, from there, you can also have frontier models that underlie these agents represent these different people. And so, again, going back to the point, I think it's going to be about like new sort of sense of teams, managerial science, organizational behavior that Joanne mentioned. It's going to be a massive scaling of that and realizing that it's not winner take all, but it's going to be together we're better, and that humans have just need to figure out how to be better orchestrators on top of the orchestration agents.
Wow, a new workforce. And and for those of you that maybe looked at AI agents a year and a half ago, those were more custom, where you kind of building them from the ground up as a unique thing, a unique stack. But now, especially with Cloud Code and CoWork, there's this decoupling of the skills and the knowledge from the actual intelligence of the model, so that it becomes a lot easier to scale these things and have to, multiple different agents scaling up the work that they can do. Joanne, I'm curious about what you've seen for AI agents and how they've actually had an impact.
Yeah, it's hard to build too much on top of the great knowledge that Megan and Damien just dropped. But I mean, I think the thing that strikes me about this sort of rise of the agent infrastructure is how dependent it is on the humans who are putting the inputs into these agents, right? Building the prompts, building out the workflows, like setting the orchestration to be done, but creating the seven different agents that Damien mentioned in the example, to go up to the partner. And so, I think the themes that I see of the agents that are working really well are, carefully scoped workflows, grounded in really high quality, human verified, well-structured data, right? I mean, the advantage that we have right now as we're starting to build all these tools is that they're based on really trustworthy layers of human grade, like human verified information. We'll see if that continues over time, or if it's just, AI building off of AI and what that looks like in terms of quality. But I think, carefully scoped workflows, high quality, well-structured data, and often workflows that were either highly inefficient or very error prone before. So again, going back to the legal aid space, the areas that seem sort of like the tip of the iceberg here are intake, right? Which was super slow, like nobody wanted to do it. Very, hard, like often human error because eyes start to glaze over. Perfect example for an agentic workflow, right? That can just like review, qualify, triage, etc. Research agents, right? Research is so slow, even for the best, most highly trained individual humans, but like that can be so much of that can be supplemented very quickly by doing that work. And then a lot of transactional work, right? That those sort of repetitive contract review drafting. I don't know if anyone caught the Claude for Legal webinar last week or the week before. That thing had 20,000 registrants, right? Like, this is just for legal, right? And so there's just so much potential for some of these things that can really replace that repetitive work in a very high quality way, leaving, as Damien mentioned, a lot of time for humans to do what humans do best. And some of that is going to be the really high stakes stuff, right? Like you still want that partner to review the information, and then they're still going to have to practice for the trial in front of the judge, right? They're not going to put the AI in front of the judge. So they really still do need to know that case, but that frees up their time to develop that, the perfection of the legal argument and the tone and all the sort of pieces that make it uniquely human.
About the 20,000 that attended that webinar, that was amazing. And there was a comment on LinkedIn about Claude isn't necessarily cheaper anymore. And now you got the cheaper, better, faster. But I replied to that and I said, well, the thing that beats all three of those things is distribution. And if you can get 20,000 people to show up, that's a little crazy. Um, so I'd like to turn to the next topic, which has to do with what does real transformation within legal look like? Because we talk about these different tools, these agents that are beyond tools, they can actually act somewhat on their own, but with the knowledge and skills and direction that we give them. Um, what, for the benefit of our audience, like what does true transformation look like within a law firm? And I'm not talking specifically about efficiency gains, although clearly there is that. But does it beg the question of there being a new type of model that we're looking at? Is it AI first law firms? What does that mean? What do you think, Joanne?
You just you answered the question for me, unfortunately. I think I have two answers to this question. One is, I think, to your point on operating models. Right now, I think we are still in the world of tacking AI on top of existing workflows that we know and love. And I think the future, what real transformation looks like, is when we start to really look at those workflows and say, like, is this the way it should be? Is this the way we should be, practicing the law? Or is there a better way that actually starts with AI? First, I think, 3 to 5 years from now, a lot of our workflows that we know and love today are going to be just very, very different because the bulk of the human work is going to come after, not before, right? It's going to be verifying the insights, it's going to be sampling in QC, it's going to be auditing and verification rather than doing the individual manual work from the get-go to find those insights. I think that's going to have downstream effects on things like staffing models, which is going to be good and bad. The billable hour, moving to more outcome-based pricing, all these things that we're seeing. The second answer I have to this question that I personally think is sort of like even more interesting than how operating models are changing is how that's going to affect the industry, right? So legal services is what, a $700 billion market right now. Is that going to shrink? Maybe. Is it going to increase? Are we going to become a more litigious society, right? And that has, like the barrier to entry to practice the law, I think is going to go down dramatically. Now, on one hand, that may mean more frivolous lawsuits, more burden on the courts, some like negative downstream impacts. On the other hand, that may mean that people who previously, were having an injustice against them and couldn't use the legal system to fight back can, right? Maybe that leads to less government process dysfunction. Maybe that leads to just like a better functioning society overall. I honestly don't think it's a foregone conclusion either way, but I think it's a really interesting and important thing for us all to be thinking about.
Well, especially with Nikki's in vacation, really, before we started, this is real change happening now. And Megan, I'm really curious about what your thoughts are on what real transformation looks like, and if it's even possible to accomplish what we need to in the time that we have.
I think it's a really great question. Maybe for me, potentially a controversial view is that real transformation is going to look like the time that we stop talking about AI as something revolutionary. Because when email you, like everyone's talking about email, right? And then all of a sudden, like, no one's going to applaud a law firm for using email. And so I think the fact is that more and more people are onboarding into using these tools one way or another. Maybe there's going to be a whole spectrum of kind of use. There's light use all the way to power users, right? The legal quants internal to a firm. But in my mind, I think there's going to be all these different incremental developments, I think internal to the people that are the pioneers, maybe internal to the firm that are driving, how the law firm should be using these various tools. But over time, I think it's going to just have this windfall effect where people stop necessarily talking about how AI is being integrated because we're seeing maybe a rise in a new workforce, right? Like the AI agents becoming sort of this layer that everybody collaborates with in some sense. What is interesting, though, your point about efficiency is a lot of people view efficiency right now as purely one dimensional, a speed sort of driven definition. But a lot of efficiency that could happen is going to be a better definition of productivity and what productivity is going to mean for the attorney. And what I mean by that is, right now, at least what I really like to work on is questions about simulation. Simulation, not only for the training of associates and kind of changing how we're going to prepare the current and next generation of attorneys, using kind of AI to role play and help them prepare for depositions or prepare for negotiations, but simulation also as a strategy-based tool where people or partners are going to be able to play out or gameplay kind of various not only team configurations that could make sense for a particular client project, but also playing out, how you would like to go about a deposition or how you would like to go about, the negotiation. These simulations, I think what's really fascinating about it for kind of a transformative sense is that we're increasing kind of the scope of what is worth kind of the value of legal work. Now we're kind of not necessarily saying purely the monetary sort of currency is just time, but actually we have a better sense of what value could look like when we're able to sort of simulate these workflows or simulate the teams that are going to go through these workflows. We're going to have better definitions around how do you actually provide quality legal work. And so to me, like efficiency might transform into actually very concrete terms to defining what is going to be value generating about our profession, and that we actually know how to justify it beyond just saying, I worked 10 hours on X task. And so, in kind of a twofold sense to summarize, I think transformation is something where when we stop talking about it, that's when the true transformation has happened. But the other side of it is that I think we're going to be better and better attorneys. And that means that we have explicit metrics on what is defining quality and explicit ways of saying more concretely what is the value add of us as a profession.
That's awesome. Damien, what does real transformation look like?
I agree with Megan that it becomes boring, and the way that it becomes boring, I think, is related to my experience with Cloud Code. The world shifted in December. You didn't know the world shifted, but it did, because all of a sudden Cloud Code is now able to code maybe better than most of the coders you know. So what I did is that I started using it in January, and at first I said, "Hey, ask me for permission to do every single thing." Because I'd been burned before. And I said, I want to be able to look over every single part of the code and don't do anything without my permission. And then I would look at the code and I'm like, oh, that's pretty good. Accept. And then accept. And then accept. Accept. And then pretty soon I just said, all right, cool, YOLO. Just do it all. Right? Because it's so good that I don't need to have that oversight. So I think that that is true for coding systems. And what is legal but legal code? That is, as we think about these symbolic systems, that is symbolic code for computers, or legal code, the governmental statutes, cases, etc. As we build the systems that become ever more reliable, we're going to go from accept to accept to accept to just YOLO because it's so good. So I think true transformation is going to be when, with Cloud Code, I just let it, I jam with it for about 30, 40, 50 minutes and ask a lot of questions and it asks a lot of questions of me. And then I just let it run for like 3 or 4 hours. And then after it's finished, then I look at the output, and if it needs to be iterated, I iterate. So I think this is maybe where we're headed with legal agents, to be able to say, hey, I as a client ask the bot a bunch of questions, and we jam for a little while, and then the bot works for a while and then gets back to me. And whether it does that for consumers or does that for lawyers or other legal professionals, I think is probably where we're headed. So in this world that I've just described, where you on the front end jam a little bit and then wait for a while for the output, that really, we have to think about systems thinking. How does that affect our justice system? How does it affect law firm systems? And how does it affect, legal aid systems? And how does it affect the courts, the judiciaries, and also alternative dispute resolution, like the American Arbitration Association and others? As the bots are ever more capable, I joke, but it's not a joke, but we're building plaintiffs bots and we're building defense bots. And that work is shrinking the cost of litigation and increasing the volume of litigation, which is overwhelming our already overwhelmed courts. So we're also building court bots to be able to deal with that increased volume. And so now as we think about this, is that good or bad? Because now the person who had maybe a $50,000 dispute, that any lawyer in the past would say that's just not enough for me to even take on a contingency because I'll spend more on legal fees than the 50. Maybe now that $50,000 dispute can be met because now it's less expensive. Maybe it'll be shrunk to such a point where a company will say, yeah, I got sued 10,000 times last month, like I got sued 10,000 times the month before, but I still pay less on legal fees than I did back in 2022. And when we think about this world, we value things that are expensive, that in lawsuits have historically been expensive. We don't value things that are cheap. Who cares about going to small claims court? Almost nobody, because that is so cheap. So what if dispute resolution whether it's in the courts or in arbitration, becomes so cheap that now we can resolve disputes incrementally cheaper. I think that is maybe the future that we're all looking for, and maybe our great hope for access to justice.
Absolutely. And Bridget McCormick talked about that a little bit in her keynote yesterday. But with the time we have left, we have about 3 minutes before questions come up, and I just wanted to direct us to a final take for each of us. And Damien, you kind of anticipated it, but the question has to do with, you know, for the benefit of the audience, where is AI in the law going in the next 3 to 5 years? Final take, a sentence if you can, but more than that's okay. How about you, Megan?
I think this is a really tough question. It's always hard to say like where things are necessarily going. For me, I think the most exciting thing that will come is we're going to learn how to be better collaborators. I think historically, attorneys were very solo entrepreneurs in a way. Even if we worked within a law firm, we were still building our own internal practices. I think the way that these tools are evolving, especially in using Claude Code or in using any of the other computer use agents, what we're seeing is we're getting better and more specific at the way that we are articulating our preferences. Historically, a lot of these tools were very instructive language, meaning we're just directing, right? Like you have to do this, you have to do that, you have to do this. But now that it comes back 70, 80%, we have to learn how to be better at expressing our preferences and how to edit better or how to audit better. And all of these things actually are a mind shift in how we sort of cognitively articulate these types of preferences. And so right now, like what these tools are really good at is actually asking us questions more Socratically. Like, is this what you really wanted? Is this how you tease things out? And we're going to start building that muscle memory of how to get there very quickly and how to explain, from the get-go that this is what we want, this is how we envision things. And maybe over time, more broadly speaking, it's again going back to we're just going to be better managers at using these tools. And so that to me is what's probably most exciting and most going to be lifting for the next little while as these models sort of independently get better.
So, Joanne, the unfair question for you, where is AI in the law going in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, I mean, I can't wait to look back on this in 3 to 5 years and see how wrong we all were. But I think legal work is going to be almost unrecognizable from what it is today, right? We are so still in our like GeoCities, Ask Jeeves moment of this particular technology. And, I think if you look at the legal tech field and the broader tech industry, I think a lot of the big players right now are going to be either not around or markedly different. I think it's going to be a different, or like not entirely different, but a lot of different cast of characters. I think that the types of legal workflows that we have, we're not going to be able to remember a time, even in this short time frame, when we didn't start with AI and everything wasn't AI first. I think there will probably be somewhat of a bubble that has burst to some extent. And coming out on the other side of that, there are going to be firms and organizations that have been the quote unquote losers in this game. But I think the really creative lawyers, the firms and the organizations that have leaned in early and learned how to use this tech as the mainframe of their work are going to be the ones that come out on top. And my hope, to Megan's point about collaboration and the discussions about humanity here, is that people are going to like their jobs more and that it's going to be more pleasant to be a legal professional in 3 to 5 years.
Damien, what does
I,
the next 3 to 5 years look like?
I think that as we think about Megan's really good point about a question answering and where the bots figure out our taste. That is, your way of lawyering is not the way of my way of lawyering, is not the way of someone else doing lawyering. Sorry, the bots knowing our taste is going to be one thing that's happening. And the other takeaway for the next 3, 6 months is to be able to say this right now is the time to run. Because just like Ubers were super cheap, like $15 to go to the airport, and now it's maybe more expensive than taxis were. In the same way, tokens are being subsidized at a very heavy rate. So it's super cheap to build right now. I'm spending $200 a month for Cloud Code, and I'm getting X size value for that. But that's not going to last forever. So if you are even thinking about building, do it now before the token cost goes really expensive, and before now, right now it's $200 a month. How soon before it's $2,000 a month, and it's too cost prohibitive? So I would say that if you're thinking about building, jump in now.
That's a really great point, and I want to, share with everyone that there are also open source models out there that are getting better and better year over year. And sometimes you don't need it to be like the latest, greatest, smartest model to just get stuff done. So keep that in mind for keeping token costs down. And where we're going, as to quote Dr. Emmett Brown, we don't need roads. um, so I think if we have any questions there, Satish, just let us know.
Yeah, thank you. Wow, so many insights again. How many times can a mind be blown in one conference? I think there's no limit. A question that we get often is about new lawyers and law students. So the question goes something like this. If we are going to continue to offload some of these basic skills to agents, then how will the next generation learn? And a follow-up to that is, what are we going to be teaching people in law school right now? Because that's clearly a broken model. It's not going to train people for the work that they're going to be doing very soon. And so if you could kind of answer those two parts or that two-part question.
I've got an answer, and I'd be interested in my co-panelists. And it comes in the form of an anecdote that my next door neighbor wants to build a fence 6 inches from my house. This is literally true. And so in October, I vibe coded a version of like 7 different versions of a complaint, and I sent that to him saying, hey, if the fence company breaks ground tomorrow, we're going to have an issue. So we've been negotiating for the last 6 months, and it came to a head on April 1, where they said, yep, we're going to break ground in the spring. So I filed the lawsuit. But before I filed the lawsuit, I still hired a lawyer, my friend Jake, who I've known for 25 years, and I love and trust Jake. Jake, the reason, I have litigated for 15 years, and I have access to maybe the best legal tech tool in the world. With both those skills, I still hired Jake. And the reason I hired Jake is because I said, okay, I'm going to file the complaint and the temporary restraining order. And he said, don't file the TRO. I said, why? I've got a gun. Why can't I shoot it? And he said, well, if you file the TRO, that's a very high burden because you have to show that there's irreparable harm. And they could just tear out the fence. So the judge might rule against you, and then forevermore for the rest of the litigation, you're going to be seen as the person that they ruled against. So why don't you just file the complaint? And then what's the odds of your neighbor building a fence in the middle of an active lawsuit and pissing off the judge? There's next to no chance of that. So you get the results you want, no fence, without having to do the risk. That is insight that Jake had in his brain that I didn't have as a litigator of 15 years, and the cases, statutes, and regulations that Vincent had didn't have. So I think that those insights, to the question about what do associates need to learn, they need to learn insights like that. And they don't learn it by document review, like I did document review. They do that with working on active cases like Satish did, and working on active cases like Tom did. So I would say that maybe we are in the best time for young lawyers to be able to get those insights through the front lines, helping people.
So one of the things that is actually one of my deepest passions is exactly this pillar of legal education and associate training. For me, I think the big thing that we've been working on is how do you use sort of AI in a complementary sense of, creating these AI simulation trainings. And so we had built tools, a negotiation platform to simulate using various agents to simulate not only the client agent, the opposing counsel, and other specialist attorneys and kind of bringing them in when it's necessary. I think one of the biggest things in law school is that it seems to be sort of this chasm between what you're learning in law school and then kind of going into practice and being a baptism by fire. And then for all the years in the beginning that you're working on document review, for example, you forget kind of that fire that you had in law school to exercise your analytical thinking, your critical thinking. And I think what's going to be really exciting about using things like AI simulation training is we're tapping into experiential knowledge, building the judgment that Damien is mentioning. And in effect, we're kind of bridging and making sense of all the skills that we learned in law school day one in practice, where you might still be doing very modest amounts of grunt work, for example, but the simulation training, being able to kind of get in active cases, that's going to be kind of what you get to experience head on and in a low stakes environment. We don't have that many options right now to feel like we can fail safely in a sense. And AI simulation kind of definitely enables that and allows you to kind of have a diversity of thinking. Let me try out these strategies and bring in new insights and see what works for me, what's going to bring in my style as an attorney. And so to me, like there's probably going to be no exciting time than now to start thinking like, can we actually use AI as almost the solution? While we have tools that are going to be amazing at executing work, we're going to also have these AI tools that are going to be building muscles that we've always had. We just took the long path to building those muscles. Now we can kind of do these simulation trainings on the fly. And it's nothing new. Like the flight simulator analogy has been there forever. Pilots, again, have to have 10,000 hours in a flight simulator. Let's do 10,000 hours of AI simulation training, for example, for attorneys, and get them to, start voicing up very quickly what they think are going to be important on active cases and actual running cases with their partners.
I'll just add to those great insights that, I'm actually really optimistic as well about this. I think the new lawyers coming out of law schools are going to be the winners here. And part of that is because they are not burdened by the muscle memory of the old ways, right? Like they don't have anything to unlearn. And so they can learn these new, methods and be creative about it, using that fire that got them into law school in the first place, from the get-go. And so I'm really excited about the future of the law with these like new, even more skilled and strategic attorneys coming in.
I just finished up my course with my law students at Suffolk Law School, and they just turned in yesterday their assignment, which is a transformation plan for a law firm they plan to work at. And if they're any indication of the future, we have a lot to look forward to. Very bright students, and they have lots of great ideas.
Okay, last question, and then we have a 10-minute break. The idea of the human in the loop, how long are we going to rely on that? Is that going to go away at some point, or is that forever a value that we need to adhere to?
I've got some thoughts, and I'm really interested in Megan and Joanne's. So there's human in the loop, and that is a blocker where the machine waits for you to be able to hit accept. So that is human in the loop. But there's also a second category called human on the loop, where you're kind of seeing what happens. You're seeing the thought process. You're seeing what's happening. So that you're not actually, there's no blocker there. You're just watching. And then there's human in control, where maybe you let it go for 3 hours and you see a audit trail, but you're not actually watching. You're just seeing the end product. And I think that we should move from human in the loop being the paradigm to maybe think about those three: human in the loop, human on the loop, and then human in control and looking at the audit trail. Because I think that really gives us a better indication of what I'm doing today with Cloud Code and what I think everybody will be doing with legal work.
Yeah, I would second that. I sometimes I get frustrated by the term human in the loop because it sort of implies like the AI is doing the work. Like whenever somebody says AI did this for me, I get a little frustrated because like, no, you put in the prompt. Like you need to take the accountability and the responsibility for the quality of the output. And also like this wouldn't have existed if the human hadn't created it. So I really like you're framing that last one, Damien, of the human is controlled. This is at the end of the day, these are still tools, as autonomous as we may make them. The human is still driving the truck until we get to really dystopian worlds of AGI. But for the moment, it is still really all about the human, regardless of how often or how far in they are. They're still the ones in the driver's seat.
Yeah, just +1 to everything that the co-panelists have said. And I think the control thing is going to be, and accountability is going to be very fundamental here. And so going back to sort of the point of what exactly are our attorneys going to learn is the auditing component, right? It's actually like going to be actually even more exciting because every single day your job is to look for that needle in the haystack. What could go wrong, right? And so all the training that you've had to be risk averse in the legal profession, it's going to be 20x that, because your job is to make sure that even if everything is at 95, 96% quality, right, you're still looking for that small percentage. And that's going to always be sort of that responsibility of the attorney or the human attorney here in this case. And so I think it's actually exciting in this sense, because when we talk about what's going to be exciting about the jobs of the future, it's that we're always going to be critical and we're always going to exercise this analytical component.
Well, thank you all. That was so fascinating. I think it was a perfect encapsulation of the state of AI.
Thanks, everyone.